question: how to cross the flood. How to make it through. Every day I live on this planet, living this life, in my practice, and seeing the status, seeing the current developments in people's lives, in the world, if you will, and the understanding that people have towards this path, towards this teaching, makes me become more cognizant of what the Buddha said repeatedly. Not just him, but many other students of his also reiterated, repeated, in reference to the flood that one has to cross. So every day I notice that the flood waters are in fact quite deep, very sticky, heavy, vast to cross, which necessitates that we do not make light of the work that has to be done. Taking a back seat while letting things just unfold, hoping that we might develop somehow in our practice, in our understanding of ourselves, of the mind, developing in our capacity to gain and understand deeply and therefore have wisdom, discernment, whereby we avoid making the same mistakes as we used to, while at the same time growing in our virtues or virtuous qualities. We can't take a backseat, we can't take a passive role in that. It requires effort to cross the flood. Plainly stated, we require the practice of the, and by the way, when I mention practice or the training, mentioned so many times in the discourses, in the suttas, patipada, what that is basically the Noble Eightfold Path. These are not principles that you should just repeat to yourself. Right view, right intentional thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. They're not just terms like that, labels. When push comes to shove, in the middle of your day, when the emotions run high and things are on the line, really important things for you are on the line. So basically, you have to make a decision or you have to act. When you're about to act emotionally, intensely, driven, the Noble Eightfold Path tells you, if you're practicing it well, or if you are practicing to begin with, it gives you a moment of pause to consider. That's what the Noble Eightfold Path, at least, is trying to do. To create that moment of restraint before you act on your emotions. So by that moment of pause, of restraint, suddenly many things become clear. If you don't act on the emotions, you definitely will not have any remorse for having done something that you were going to regret. either then or, long time after. That's one way. So the Noble Eightfold Path is the raft. In the suttas we have the Buddha saying, a man decides to cross a vast river, so vast that you can't see the other side, but it's flooded. It's like really, rough waters. But there's not finding any ferries or anything or boat to carry him over. What he does decide is to go into the bushes and collects reeds and bamboo and twine and twigs and ropes and things, and he ties them up together, forming a raft for himself to cross, and he does cross it. The Noble Eightfold Path takes shape in our lives not all at once. For many people, if not all of us, at least that's been my experience. Sometimes one or more of the Eightfold Path, or the aspects of it, will stand out more than others for you to rely on or work with or have more confidence in. Might be a right livelihood that you're able to anchor yourself in or make a transition to, shift your life direction, and suddenly you realize by shifting, let's say, your job, the nature of your work. For example, if you were somebody who works in a dangerous environment where your life is always on the line, but the pay is good, and there's drugs or there's alcohol, there's people inebriated, let's say, somebody who works at a bar or somebody who works as a bouncer at somebody who's not going to be deal with people who are working on all cylinders, as they say. So it's not a pleasant place to be. I've met some of these individuals in my life in the past, and they were so happy to have left that world. And there you go. Already there's a big obstacle that was removed for that person by that decision they made. So that might be their gateway to practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's a one reed for you, one bamboo for you for the raft. So the more you do this, you gain more confidence, the more strength in yourself, and the ability to trust your decisions. After all, when you're about to restrain yourself from acting out or behaving emotionally, you don't restrain just out of faith, blindly. You restrain because you've had some experience with similarly difficult situations. So that becomes a stepping stone or a springboard for you to trustingly take a leap of faith based on previous experiences and make a change happen. So now you're graduating your way into the Noble Eightfold Path, and all of a sudden you see one after the other the reeds or the bamboo come together and you have a raft. And the more you maintain a life with Noble Eightfold Path, the more the raft is going to be held together nice and tight. Because you can't have floating bamboo around and you're crossing such a terrible flood. You need to have the whole thing stay in one piece to help you cross the river or the sea to the other shore. And once we do cross it, Lord Buddha says, I taught you the Dhamma not for the sake of grabbing on to the raft, but to cross it and to dump it. Once you're there, you've crossed it, mission accomplished. Now what I notice happening in the world of Dhamma, meaning Buddhism, is that there's a lot of worship of the raft. empty worship. Empty, when I say worship, I mean identification. And this could be one's identification with the level of understanding they've had, or it could be intellectual, it could be meditative, some type of an attainment, or just an idea or understanding, or view basically. The Buddha called it the view, ditthi. Ditthi, view or wrong view. When we say view in Buddhism, we're talking about wrong view. Otherwise it's sammaditthi, which is right view, harmonious view, which brings peace and love and happiness in your heart and the world around you. Contentment, serenity, because that is the compass, gauge for all the other aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path to follow, to gain completion. Why? Because right view is the light that leads the way. It's like a car that you're driving with strong, powerful headlights, pitch blackness, but you can move forward because you know what's in front of you. So in a world where you see a lot of people adhering to this or that and forgetting the word of the Buddha, going with the trends, going with whatever is, to the palate of the current society, etc. I've talked about this many times, but in different, settings. But it's so pervasive that it's damaging. It's thickening. It's turning the floodwaters now into quicksand, which is even more terrible for that person, for those individuals who are listening to such teachers, such people. So, because it's already difficult. In the Milinda Panya Sutta, I'm sorry, not the Sutta, but the questions of King Milinda to Venerable Nagasena, recently we did a talk on that. One of the metaphors that Venerable Nagasena was using. But in another one, another question, he's using, because King Milinda was asking him to describe him Nibbana, and you can't, So what you have is just basically antonyms that you could say. Or at the most you can just use metaphors. So King Milinda asks him, what did you mean by Nibbana being difficult? Like a mountain. He says, Great King, just like it is very difficult to navigate your way and try to climb a high altitude mountain, let's say in the Himalayas, sometimes it will take people many, many, many weeks to get to, if they get to summit, if they get to beyond the first, base camp, as they say. It's difficult. Every inch that they crawl their way up, they might have, hypoxia, lacking oxygen, and headaches, and excruciating pain, so they have to come down. So it's very difficult. So he uses analogies like that as the path being difficult. Now what I notice is many people noticing that, or going to the opposite extreme, making it seem like it's extremely easy. They've created a culture where they have trivialized the whole process, such as talking about things that are going on or using standards used in society to understand the Dhamma. That doesn't work. using the tools that society or the current narratives being offered within the current contemporary level of understanding and watering down the Dhamma to match that. That's terribly dangerous. This is why I was saying how I'm noticing that the floodwaters are becoming stickier and stickier for people, individuals who are truly interested in practice. So it's heartbreaking to witness that. But our teacher are not these teachers that are all around, and our teacher is the Buddha. In fact, it's the Dhamma. It's the Dhamma itself. Because what's happening is people are becoming such believers in their understanding of the Dhamma that they're not seeing the Dhamma. This is what I meant by ditthi. And this was a dangerous phenomenon even at the time of the Buddha. That's why he placed ditthi, sammaditthi, as the very first. Because even his own students disrespected him. Even when he was expiring, when he was dying, people were there, they still wanted to debate with him. You still had monks who did not respect him. Imagine. They weren't young monks, by the way. Some of them were old in age, but they were not respectful towards the Dhamma, towards the Buddha. You have plenty of those today who don't believe in the efficacy of the Dhamma. So because they don't strive, they don't practice, and they're not really dedicating themselves to resoluteness, to being really dedicating whatever time they have on this planet to diligent practice themselves, to attain the goal, which is freedom from suffering themselves, they cop out. They take the easy way out. There's a lot of pursuit of renown and fame and this and that. And Lord Buddha talked about this and warned us against this. There's so many suttas in the discourses, just in the numerical discourses. I remember when I was working on that, it was like one after the other. The Buddha warns us against people. Same with the other middle-length discourses. You see it all the time. And of course the Sutta Nipata, some of the earliest discourses, this was something that was happening then. People would come and ordain not for the sake of really, genuinely pursuing what Venerable Sariputta was pursuing, Venerable Mahamoggallana was pursuing. We have to be dedicated to it. So what is happening in a society of superficiality, we are trying to project that mundane, superficial way of understanding onto the Dhamma, onto the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha died. It really doesn't make a difference to him whether you practice or not. His job, he did his task, it was done. He did a beautiful thing. Aside from the fact that he became the Buddha, he attained to what was so difficult to attain, but he also shared it. And he put up with so much ignorance for 45 years. That's it. And we are so fortunate that the torch has been passed on for so many centuries. And that there are teachers who are teaching, have been teaching. But ultimately, the work has to be done by us. So you have to push yourself outside, push yourself outward, outside your comfort zone. That's my answer to you as to how to cross the flood. You can't just sit there and like a ferry, and just pay the person, and just they'll take you across. You'll take a nap meanwhile, or be lost in your intellectual meanderings, acrobatics, following this idea, pursuing that interpretation, fighting and debating, which is another thing that's happening. People are so eager to tell you what they think. This is quite a strange phenomenon to me. Everybody's dying to tell you what they think, even when what they think is absolute rubbish. Zero experience in the Dhamma, read a few books, or they have really, really given it their all, but they still are dying to tell the world about what they think, what the Buddha meant, based on their intellectual reasoning, rational thinking, etc., their conclusions. It's difficult to answer questions because it pulls you out from the work you're doing. So I can just imagine what the Buddha and the Arya Savakas had to go through, being pulled out when people came in and asking questions. And I laugh at people who would criticize the Theravada tradition or the earliest branch of Buddhism by saying, oh, you're self-centered. I had met these people for decades in the past. If there's any bodhisattva, the Buddha was it. He was the example par excellence, as well as his students, which it continues, that tradition continues in some areas of the world, although in small amounts you will find them. It's so hard to find true Dhamma being taught in the world today, because people have certain expectations. People have certain intellectual expectations. The Buddha could be sitting right next to them and they will not even see him, unless it comes with bells and whistles. That's religious conceit. That's spiritual conceit. That is conceit, plain and simple. And it's so hard to break through that, which makes it almost impossible for such individuals to cross. So, in conclusion, I would say, please check to see how much of yourself are you carrying with you on the raft, because you cannot carry anything other than just you. You can't bring in your luggage of intellect upon the raft. It cannot carry that. It's too heavy. It will sink. You can't carry your own interpretations of the Noble Eightfold Path with you, your own new versions of it with you, changing the words of the Buddha to fit your own agendas. That is the most silliest, insane thing that you could do, but that's what I see happening on behalf of teachers in the world who've lost their path, they've lost their way, and they've come up with their own proprietary version of the Dhamma. But there's nothing new in that, because this was happening even at the time of the Buddha. Devadatta was doing that while the Buddha was alive. So it should not hit us, as a surprise. But that doesn't mean that we should be following such characters. So go back to the teachings of the Buddha. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to this or that teacher. Ultimately, you need to... These are just pathways These are just entry points, suggestions, proposals for you to, for listeners to obviously make, hear, be introduced to something, and maybe something gets triggered in them. And they go, that's interesting, or I don't agree with, but I want to probe that a little bit, and let me go ahead and look it up. And when you're looking up something, please make sure that it is something that once you do find what you're looking for, it will directly affect your level of suffering, meaning it will decrease it. We study the Dhamma not to add more stuff. Upadhi is the term. Upadhi is an asset, things that you own, things that you want to grab onto, things that you claim to be your own. It could be ideas, it could be beliefs, that's the big one. Opinions, views, which people seem to have a lot of. Debating and conflicts and sharing opinions and, giving feedback or something like that. And, usually it's negative anyhow, because rarely do people have the humility to say, I don't know, because everybody knows apparently. And they know a lot. In fact, so much that they are ready to teach you. Joe Schmo, anybody on the street, they want to come and talk to you and say, this is what it is. You're wrong because, so there isn't that. That's what I mean by conceit. It wasn't like this a generation ago, as bad as this. So that's another factor for us to be aware whether we're adding on to the stickiness of the flood waters. Because you want it to be as easy to navigate as possible. Because life is already very difficult, very hard to begin with. Bearing a body, making sure it doesn't get sick all the time, protecting it, keeping it healthy, getting an education, getting a source of income. All these things already make life hard. Maintaining relationships. So the Dhamma is there to make things easier in the right way. What I mean by that is you must gain more understanding, which equates with, leads to you feeling more contented within yourself, under your skin, feeling okay, not at the cost of other people being crushed, not at the cost of criticizing and shooting down others, and by that feeling good. That's terrible, and that's what the mudslinging is all about. That's what is happening today, debating. The Buddha said, no wise person can ever come out of a debate. It's in the Sutta Nipata, go check it out. No wise person can ever come out of winning in a debate. It's not going to make anybody smarter, wiser, more humble. I mean, the winner. People used to come and debate with Lord Buddha, and he would avoid it as much as possible. But when there was some chance of the person breaking through their ignorance, the Buddha would ask them some questions. And at the end of those interactions, the person, in most cases, would bow down in humility and in joyful acceptance. And that acceptance oftentimes, majority of the cases, would lead the person to go forth and ask for ordination, because they realized, the egg was cracked now. They were about to hatch. They were about to come out. Because the understanding that we develop in trying to probe and comprehend things must have a purpose, and that purpose has to have happiness and joy at the end, contentedness at the end, serenity and peace at the end, so that when the time is there for you to close your eyes for the last time, you close them in peace and happiness, in comfort. Sukha, the opposite of dukkha. That's why you have a brain. That's why you have emotions. That's why you have a body. That's why you have the ability to speak, to ponder, to cognize, and everything else that goes along with it. And the Dhamma is the shortest path to take you there. In this very life, in this very body, Diteva Dhamme, in this very birth, here. So stop wasting time wondering about, well, is there a shortcut to the floodwater crossing? Do it. Don't look back. Don't look who's swimming next to you, who's trying to, use another raft over there. That's, focus on your work, not what others are doing. I have to speak about what's happening in the world of Dhamma because I have to, given the situation. So you don't have to toil over this. Trust. Trust. The Noble Eightfold Path will take you straight to arahantship. Guaranteed. That's not my guarantee. That's the guarantee given by the Buddha's own lips. So long as the Eightfold Path is available, so long as there are those rare individuals who are teaching the Noble Eightfold Path, and so long as, most importantly, there are those who are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, the world will never be short of arahants. These were the words of the Buddha. Make sure you put your whole effort into that. Seeking comfort of understanding, peace, contentedness, happiness in your heart, while you're stepping your feet onto the other shore. Standing up proudly for having made it. Just like countless others who have made it before you. There's nothing short in you. If you have faith, if you have trust in yourself, if you have clarity of understanding, if you have diligent effort, persevering energy within your heart to not give up, and you're resolutely pursuing that path, you will get there. So long as you're living virtuously, without changing the words of the Buddha to fit your own boxes.